There was something wrong with the water at Camp Lejeune Marine Corps Base Camp, North Carolina. But the U.S. Marine Corps and the Department of the Navy failed to act despite clear evidence of severe groundwater contamination from dry cleaners and other toxic industrial processes as early as 1953. Today we will take a closer look at what happened at Camp Lejeune. Why? According to official government records, more than 1 million people have been exposed to contaminated water at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1987. That's more than the entire population of the United States today. Here's why. In the late 1970s, routine tests showed the presence of VOCs in the base water supply, but these early tests couldn't quantify the levels of contamination. Then, in 1980, a U.S. Army lab tested Camp Lejeune's water for the Navy. About 30% of those claims involved birth defects. In 2012, Congress passed the Cheney-Ensminger Act, Public Law 112-239. This landmark legislation amended the Veterans Health Care Act of 1992 to direct the Department of Veterans Affairs to presume that certain illnesses were, quote, directly linked to the water contamination. In August 2022, after a decade of effort, Congress passed the Camp Lejeune Justice Act of 2022, which repealed the FTCA's waiver of sovereign immunity for intentional torts committed at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1987. The act allows all individuals exposed to the contaminated water at Camp Lejeune during the specified time period to file tort claims against the federal government for physical injuries, death, pain and suffering, emotional distress, punitive damages, and other losses. Do you think this is fair compensation for everything that's happened? What do you think will happen next? Your support helps us continue our work. Thank you. See you soon. The Camp Lejeune Justice Act represents a major turning point in the fight for justice and accountability. It allows thousands of victims to seek the compensation they deserve for the harm they suffered as a result of the government's negligence. This meant that veterans exposed to the contaminated water while living on Camp Lejeune during the specified time period were eligible for health care benefits. And what will it take to prove causation? Also, many people are asking whether the Camp Lejeune contamination might have played a role in the unusually high cancer rates among U.S. veterans more generally. Researchers are exploring this and other important questions. This was the first time the government formally acknowledged the link between the contaminated water and health problems. But the passage of the Camp Lejeune Justice Act gives hope that after almost 70 years, the truth is finally being acknowledged and steps are being taken to make things right. However, it fell short of providing compensation or addressing the needs of civilian family members. Many family members who were exposed in utero or as children but whose parents were not on active duty were excluded from healthcare benefits. The real numbers are probably much higher because many people do know they were exposed and many more choose not to come forward. There's a reason for this. Until recently, federal law barred most tort claims against the federal government, meaning victims couldn't sue the government for damages. This is because the Federal Tort Claims Act provides that the United States shall be liable for the tort of its employees under certain circumstances, but only if the government waives its immunity. That waiver is limited to specific situations where federal law expressly provides for it. Until 2022, there was no express provision allowing lawsuits for intentional torts committed by federal employees at Camp Lejeune, and explicitly reported water is highly contaminated with other chlorinated hydrocarbons, which include solvents. Despite this and repeated warnings from private contractors in 1982 and 1983, who even informed base commanders of the poisoned wells, the contaminated water continued to flow. Official correspondence obtained by veterans suggests that Navy and Marine Corps officials downplayed the issue, withheld test results, and failed to act. Instead, they allegedly focused on cutting costs and maintaining an image of operational efficiency, even as test results became increasingly alarming. They reduced the frequency of required water tests from monthly to quarterly, drastically limiting the amount of data on the extent of the contamination. This resulted in a huge gap in knowledge about the severity of the problem. A 1983 report by an environmental consultant warned that the level of contamination found on base was unacceptable, but it remained classified for 26 years. A former Marine lieutenant colonel wrote, "Had I known then what I know now, I would have refused to drink the water, bathe my kids in it, or even washed vegetables in it." All this makes this the largest mass poisoning in American history. Retired Marine Master Sergeant Jerry Enseminger's 9-year-old daughter, Janie, passed away from acute lymphocytic leukemia in 1985. She had lived on the base between 1972 and 1981, and her illness was likely caused by exposure to the contaminated water. Today, he fights tirelessly for justice. Enseminger says he has located nearly 2,000 families who lost children and hundreds of thousands of pages of official records detailing the extent of the contamination. For over 3 decades, thousands of people were exposed to dangerously high levels of man-made chemicals, which have caused severe health problems, including cancer and birth defects. During the period of contamination, the base housed the Marine Corps Schools of Infantry, the Marine Corps' primary training facility. Tens of thousands of new Marines arrived each year. So how do we know about the problem? Between 1953 and 1987, Camp Lejeune's supply of underground drinking water was contaminated by volatile organic compounds, VOCs, largely perchloroethylene or PCE, and trichloroethylene or TCE, 2 types of dry cleaning solvents also used in metal degreasing. Other contaminants included vinyl chloride and benzene, a component of gasoline. Over the years, several on-base dry cleaners disposed of their hazardous waste through sewer lines connected to the supply of drinking water. This caused a plume of contamination to spread beneath the base. And perhaps most disturbingly, those in charge knew about the problem but did little to stop it. Welcome to my channel. Camp Lejeune is the largest of 5 major Marine Corps installations in the continental United States. How big a problem were we dealing with? Well, in 1984, one of the wells supplying water to the base was found to have PCE levels 3,400 times, higher than maximum contaminant levels currently set by the EPA. In fact, groundwater contamination levels detected in 1984 could have been lethal to anyone drinking just 1 glass of water every day for a year. While low levels of exposure to these VOCs may not immediately produce symptoms, long-term exposure is linked to a variety of cancers, birth defects, reproductive problems, and serious health conditions such as Parkinson's disease. Now, it appears the U.S. Marine Corps and the Department of the Navy knew about the contamination since 1950s and kept the information from the public for decades. The consequences were devastating. Thousands of Marines, sailors, civilian workers, and their family members fell ill with cancers and birth defects, some dying tragically young. Here's what we know. At least 1,800 Marines and family members have filed claims against the federal government for exposure to the contaminated water at Camp Lejeune. So how did the truth finally come out? After years of frustration, Enseminger and other victims turned to Congress. The struggle for full accountability continued. In 2016, the Government Accountability Office estimated that only 10 to 20% of all potentially impacted individuals had filed a claim, but finally things started to change. However, many questions remain. What kind of compensation will be awarded? How many claims will be approved? Will there be enough money to pay everyone? The fight for justice and closure is far from over. Thank you so much for watching. Please share your thoughts and comments below.